Good morning.
Good morning.
You all hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful, fantastic. I can't believe it. So 4 years ago, in April, Hugh and Claire left Sunday Whitstable to come here. I'm not going to make any comment on the fact it's taken 4 years for you to invite me to come and speak here. But it's so exciting to be here. It's so wonderful. I've been tracking your progress on Facebook and obviously catching up with you kind of periodically. And what a great building this is. Isn't this an amazing blessing from God to be able to be here? It's just great to be with you. If you've got your Bibles, you want to turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 3. I should say I feel slightly like I've been stitched up this morning by Hugh. I want to make it very clear at the offset that I have not chosen this passage to speak to you. You'll see why if you look at verse 1, which starts off by saying, "But I, brothers, could not address you as spiritual people, but as people of the flesh, as infants in Christ." You know, when you're coming to a church that you've never been to before, and you want people to like you, don't think you're nice, this is not really it. Guys, I can't address you as spiritual people. You are like children. You know, that's just saying Hugh has given me this passage this morning to give to you. But I do understand that you are in a series in 1 Corinthians, and is this the third or fourth week that you're in this? Fourth week. And the beginning of these verses really carry on from what Paul starts talking about in chapter 1, which is around the divisions within the church. And I understand that you looked at that a couple of weeks ago, so I'm actually not going to major on these first few verses, but we're going to read them for some context. What I really want to focus on this morning, what I feel God has given me for you guys, is really focusing from verse 5 down to verse 17, which is how Paul responds to this divisive heart within the church by bringing this picture of the building, the people of God, the temple of God, and what he speaks into that. And so the key verse for us this morning is verse 10, where Paul says this: "Let each one take care how he builds." I really want us to think about that this morning. I want us to ask that question of ourselves. When it comes to the church, the corporate people of God, when it comes to our individual lives and our devotion to Jesus and how that works itself out, are we taking care how we build? Are we attentive to that? And I want to say off the bat, again, the reason that I'm bringing this is not because I don't think that you as a people are not taking care how you build. From what I can see and everything that I hear, you guys are building so well. There's an encouragement here to keep building well, to not kind of settle, to not take things for granted, to not take your eye off the ball, but in your corporate life and in your individual lives, to keep focusing on building well. So we're going to read the passage and then we're going to dive in. All right, let's dive in then from chapter 3, verse 1 of 1 Corinthians. "But I, brothers, could not address you as spiritual people, but as people of the flesh, as infants in Christ. I fed you with milk, not solid food, for you were not ready for it. And even now you're not yet ready, for you are still of the flesh. For while there is jealousy and strife among you, you are not of the flesh. Are you not of the flesh, and behaving only in a human way? For when one says, I follow Paul, and another, I follow Apollos, are you not merely being human? What then is Apollos? What is Paul? Servants, through whom you believed, as the Lord assigned to each. I planted, and Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So neither he who plants, nor he who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. He who plants and he who waters are one, and each will receive his wages according to his labour. For we are God's fellow workers. You are God's field, God's building. According to the grace of God given to me, like a skilled master builder, I laid a foundation, and someone else is building upon it. Let each one take care how he builds upon it. For no one can lay a foundation other than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now, if anyone builds on the foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will become manifest, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. If the work that anyone has built on the foundation survives, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved, but only as through fire. Do you not know that you are God's temple, and that God's Spirit dwells in you? If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy him. But God's temple is holy, and you are that temple. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word, Lord. We thank you for the gift that it is to us, Lord. And we come with a sense of expectation for you to speak to us, because that's what you promised to do. And so I ask the Holy Spirit that you would just come and help me to communicate clearly your heart for these people, these dear people that you gave your life for, Jesus. You're so committed to them, so passionate about them. And I just pray that you would have open hearts to receive what it is this morning that you have for us. We ask that in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Amen. So we're going to look at three things this morning. They should come up on the screen. Firstly, we're going to look at remembering who you are building for. Secondly, remembering what you are building on. And then thirdly, remember that what you build matters. So firstly then, remember who you are building for. Let's remind ourselves of verse 5. Paul says, "What then is Apollos? What is Paul? Servants through whom you believed, as the Lord assigned to each." Now you've really got to admire Paul's humility in this situation, haven't you? You know, if you think about what's going on in this church, and I think you probably touched on this a couple of weeks ago, there's divisive hearts, division within the church, where some people are saying, I follow Paul, because Paul came and they were baptized by Paul, and then some people are saying, I know I follow Apollos, because he came after Paul, and then some people are saying, I follow Peter, and then there are some people who are trying to trump everybody by saying, oh, I follow Christ. And so there's kind of divisive sections within the church, and Paul is writing to them to try to unite them. He's trying to address these issues. And it'd be very easy for Paul to think, okay, the best way for me to do this is to unite this church around me. I'm going to make myself the integral cog, the glue that holds these people together. And so I was the first one to go in. I was the one who laid the foundation. I was the one who planted this church. So guys, stop saying, I follow Paul, or I follow Apollos, or I follow Peter, but say, I follow Paul. And that's what I want you to do. I'm the main guy here. And yet actually what he says is, what then is Apollos? And what is Paul? Servants. Servants. Just servants of God. The first thing that he says to them to try to unite them is not to say, hey guys, look at me. It's all about me. He's saying, guys, don't say, I follow this person, I follow that person. It's God's building. Remember who we're building for. It's God's. It's all about him. Who's Paul? Who's Apollos? Who's even Peter? Just servants. This is not our thing. This is God's thing. We are building for him. In verse 9, he's hammering home this point. He says, we are God's fellow workers, which is amazing, but then you are God's field, God's building. Verse 16, do you not know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you? We're not anything. Verse 7, so neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. He's saying, guys, don't miss the point. If you're arguing about which apostle you follow, you've missed the point. It's not about Paul or Apollos or Peter. It's not my building. It's not my church. It's God's. It's his building. It's for him and by him. Remembering who you're building for keeps it all about him and not about us. All about his glory and not about our glory. You know, it's funny, isn't it? There's something ingrained within us that wants to take credit for things that we haven't done. It's just natural, isn't it? So I've got a little boy, Joel, who's 5, and a daughter, Josie, who's 2.5. And the other day, Joel came into my study with a beautiful picture of a rainbow. And he said, look, Daddy, look what I've done. And I was like, wow, yeah, that's amazing. And he was like, yeah, I did it all by myself. And now I know that, my son is very talented, but I know that he didn't do it all by himself. In fact, he didn't do a huge amount of it. Miriam, my wife, drew the outline, drew the right colours. All he literally did was colour it in. So when he says to me, look what I did, I'm a bit like, well, you kind of did it. You had a part to play in that. But actually, Mummy did most of it. You just kind of coloured it. Now, I don't say this to him. I'm not a terrible father. I say, wow,
amazing, but actually there's something within him that wants to take credit for something that he hasn't really done. Before Christmas, we spent a morning washing the car. And again, kind of it took ages to get everything together, and he was really excited about doing it, and we started doing it, and then after about kind of half an hour, he kind of had enough and went inside, and then when Miriam came back, she was like, "Oh, well done, guys, you've cleaned the car." And he was like, "Yeah, we cleaned the car, Mummy." And I'm like, "Well, you kind of did. I had to pretty much redo all the bits that you've done anyway, but yeah, I guess so." But he wants to take credit for that. He thinks that his role in that process is so much greater than it actually is. And I think it's that heart attitude that Paul's tapping into here. He's challenging that thing within us that wants to take credit where actually it's not about us at all. We're just servants. Paul's saying, don't overplay your part. Don't overplay our part. Don't think too much of us. I mean, how many of us think that way, right? How many of us worry that people's opinion of us is too high? Rather, we spend time trying to cultivate a higher opinion for ourselves. Paul does completely the opposite. So, I don't want you to fall into the trap of thinking too much of us. Think greatly of God. Think greatly of Christ. Don't think greatly of me. I'm just a servant. It's not my thing. I'm not the designer. I'm not the landscaper here. It's God who has done that. And I think in the picture that Paul uses, again, he's hammering this home. We read in verse 6. He says, I planted and Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. We're quite familiar with those verses, aren't we? But when you think about the picture that Paul's using, I think he's been very deliberate. Think about those two things, planting seed and watering seed. Are they complicated things to do? If you've ever planted, you get the seed, right? I know I'm not very agricultural, but you get the seed and you put it in the soil and you push it down, put a bit of soil on top of it. Okay, that's not difficult to do, right? That's not a complicated, highbrow, need a lot of training, to plant this seed. You just literally throw it on the ground or push it in the ground. To water, how hard is it to water? You get your watering can or whatever and you do that. I mean, that's literally it. That's all you do. Okay, maybe you have to fill up your watering can first. I don't want to, downplay it too much. But these aren't particularly complicated or challenging things. And I think that's the point that Paul is making. It's a bit like saying, if you do plant a seed and then you water it and then you kind of come back and you've got your beautiful flower, your plant, or even if you've done it over a whole kind of field and you come back and you've got this crop, it's like coming back to it and going, look what I did! Look what I made! I made this happen! And it's like, well, kinda, but not really. You planted the seed and you watered it. Integral parts, important parts, but how did it grow? Oh, God gave the growth. The sun shone on it and it made it grow. And so therefore, when we remind ourselves that God brings the growth, it kind of eradicates all possibility of boasting, all need of boasting. Because it's like standing over the plant or standing over the field and going, look what I did. And actually it's like, well, yeah, you did have a part to play, but God was the one who made it grow. When you think about the fruitfulness in the church, you can celebrate it, but we've got to be careful. We don't go, look what we've done here, guys, it's amazing. It's like, no, we were faithful, we planted, and we watered, but God has brought the growth. We look at the fruitfulness in our lives, or the gifts that we've been given, or the opportunity that God gives us to serve Him and influence. And when we see God breaking in through the things that we're doing, we should celebrate it. We should feel humbled that we get to partner with God. And yet we don't go, look what I made happen. No, I planted and I watered, but God gave the growth. And it's not to say that our roles aren't therefore important. You don't get any growth if you don't plant a seed. You don't get any growth if you don't water the seed. They're important things, but they're not the things that make it happen. They're not the ultimate things. Paul's trying to walk this tightrope really between encouraging them to have a role to play. He says that in verse 9, for we are God's fellow workers, God's co-laborers. I mean, that's staggering, right? When you think about who God is. When you think about the fact that, he's glorious and mighty and he can do all things, and yet he's determined to outwork his purposes through us, like through the church, through broken vessels, through jars of clay. It's staggering. we get to partner with the King of the universe in his purposes here on the earth. That's amazing. We don't want to lose the bigness of that vision. And yet equally, immediately afterwards, Paul's like, but don't think too highly of yourself. Because it's grace. And actually, yeah, you're God's fellow workers, but you're God's field. God's building. He's the designer. He's the architect. You know, the fellow worker thing, the co-laborer. It's not like we're co-directors. You know? Like we're kind of been invited onto the board, but really like, why are we here? And God's the director. And we outwork, we just do what he tells us to do. And so therefore the glory belongs to him. And that's incredibly, I think, releasing and empowering thing when we grasp that. We remember who it is that we're building for. We remember that it's all for him. It's his building. It's his church. It's his kingdom. And so what does that mean? He is ultimately responsible for it. He's ultimately responsible. He's given us things to do, but the responsibility ultimately for us is to be obedient. We can't make anything happen. And how often do we fall into that mindset of trying to do things in our own strength? God has given us a responsibility, and we're trying so hard to just make something happen. You know, when we fall into that mindset, it's a bit like planting the seed, pouring the water on, and then just looking at it and going, grow! Grow! And we just, with all our might, and I'm going to make this thing grow, come on, grow. If I just shout loud enough, then I might see the first kind of fruit, the sapling burst through. It's just like, no, that's madness. Like, to try that is exhausting, and yet often, actually, that's how we live our lives. That's how we try to build church. That's how we try to serve God with the things that he's given us to do. It's actually, we just subtly fall into doing it in our own strength. And yet, gloriously, it's God who's the one who brings the growth. And so rather than just, planting the seed and watering it and shouting at it with all our effort and all our might to make it grow, actually all we do is we plant the seed, we water it, and then we step back and say, Father, I need you to shine on this now. I've done my bit. I've done the bit that you called me to do. I've done the bit that I'm capable of doing. Now I need you to come and bring the growth. And so therefore, if you don't, well, that's up to you. Like, I can't control that, but I've been faithful with the things that you called me to do. I planted the church, and now it's time for you, God, to bring the growth. I moved to a new area because I thought you were calling me to it. Now, God, it's up to you to bring the growth. I spoke to my colleague about Jesus, and now it's up to you, Lord, to bring the growth and to shine upon that seed that I planted. I invited this person to Alpha. I can't make them come. Now it's up to you, God, to bring the growth in their lives. I'm prayed for somebody who's sick, but I can't heal them. Now it's up to you, God, to bring your power into their lives. I'm studying your word diligently and faithfully to try to grow in you, but now it's up to you, God, to bring me revelation and to change my heart. I'm trying to practice hospitality to love people and impact them with the gospel that welcomes all. But God, now it's up to you to bring the transformation. We're planting the seeds one by one. We're watering them, but only God can bring the growth. And so therefore the encouragement for us is when progress is slower than we would like, when things seem to be hitting a wall, when we don't feel like we're in a season where we're seeing fruitfulness, we can just bring it back to God and entrust it into his hands and go, Lord, it's your building. It's your responsibility. My responsibility is to be obedient, but the power for change and transformation, growth, that all belongs to you. And the other encouragement that we should have is, because it's God's building, we should know that he is completely 100% committed to this building. He's committed to, he's set this project of his glory filling the earth. He's set it in motion through Adam and Eve. He's continued it through, obviously, Jesus coming and then commissioning the disciples to go and make disciples. It's the same commission, okay, that he gave to Adam. Go and fill the earth and be fruitful and multiply. Go and fill the earth with my word. Go and make disciples. Go and replicate. Go and multiply my image across the earth. He's committed to this project. He will see it through to the end. He's committed to his church. He's committed to his kingdom. He's going to make it happen. We've just been remembering, he is coming back. We don't have to make it happen. We just plant the seeds and we water it and we wait for him to do the growth. Secondly, we remember what we are building on. Let's read in verse 10. According to the grace of God given to me, like a skilled master builder, I laid a foundation, and someone else is building upon it. Let each one take care how he builds upon it. For no one can lay a foundation other than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. So I'm not a builder, but my understanding is that when you build a house, the laying of the foundation, when you build any kind of building, the laying of the foundation is the most important part of that building. It's the first thing that you do. Don't lay any foundation or lay a bad foundation, and it doesn't really matter what the house looks like or what the building looks like above the ground. It's not going to be stable. There's going to be a risk that it falls down. So you're going to have a building that looks incredible, that looks very, very impressive. You're going to have a church that looks very, very impressive. Or your life from the outside can look very, very impressive. But what Paul's saying is, if the foundation is not Jesus Christ, that thing won't be stable. It can look amazing, but actually it's not rooted on the security of Jesus Christ. And Paul is saying, this building that God is making, this church, this new temple, this people of God must be built on the foundation of Jesus. He's the cornerstone. Our lives must be built on the foundation of Jesus. Any other foundation that we try to lay for the church, for our lives, is false. It's not God's heart for us. Any other foundation that we try to lay other than Jesus will just bring instability rather than added stability. You see, I don't think our risk as a church or as individuals, if you're a Christian, is removing the foundation of Jesus. Okay, that's not what even Paul says. But our risk is subtly laying on other foundations in addition to Jesus. Paul says, don't let anybody try to lay another foundation. He does then encourage us to build upon the foundation with other things. But he says, don't try and lay another foundation. You know, if you think about the picture that Paul is using, you know, there's kind of it's kind of absurd, really. You know, when you lay the foundation for a building, you'd never have somebody come along and say, well, we need another foundation on top of this one. Let's just keep layering on foundations to bring extra security. No, you don't need to do that. Once you've laid the foundation, like that's it. That's the foundation. That's what the house is built upon. Anything else, you might think it's a foundation. It's not actually a foundation. And that's true for our lives. That's true for the church. The foundation is Jesus, and yet subtly we can often fall into the trap of trying to lay other foundations that we think will bring added stability, but actually all they do is bring instability. And actually what they're saying is, this foundation is not strong enough for me. That's what happens, isn't it? When we try to lay other foundations, try to put our trust in other things other than Jesus, what we're saying is the foundation of Jesus is not enough for me. So in a church context, when we start to veer away from the fundamental message of hope and new life in Jesus, in whatever subtle way we're saying, You know, and it can happen when we go, what do we do with this message to make it culturally relevant? That's a good question. Or maybe we just tweak this bit or leave this bit out. We're laying another foundation other than that of Jesus. We're saying this gospel isn't strong enough, isn't power enough to transform the world around us. It's not appealing enough to draw hearts. So we've got to tweak it, we've got to change it so that actually it will draw more people in. We're laying another foundation other than that of Jesus. Paul says, don't do it. It's not a true foundation. We do that in our lives, and we layer things in to our lives to bring us extra stability. We layer in a nice foundation of comfort. I'm going to build on Jesus, but I'm also going to layer in a little foundation of comfort there just to make it a little bit easier for me as I go. Or we might put in a layer of success. It's like I'll be confident in Jesus, but I'm also going to be confident and defined by the success in my life. Just laying another foundation other than that of Christ. We might layer in a foundation of financial security. There's stability in Jesus, but there's also stability if I've got enough money in my bank account. Or we'll layer in a foundation of recognition, or a foundation of family, or a foundation of relationships, or in the church, a foundation of growing attendance, or the growing number of small groups, or missional effectiveness. Now, not all of these things are wrong, but they're not the foundation. Jesus is the foundation. What does it mean that Jesus is the foundation? It means that He's the one that we build our lives upon. He's the one that we find our hope in. He's the one that we find our acceptance in. He's the one that we find our confidence in to approach God. That's the foundation that we build our lives. It's a gospel foundation where our hope and our trust and our confidence and our security and our identity, everything is fundamentally defined by Him, who He is, what He's done for us, what that means now for us. That's the foundation that we need to build our lives upon. And you know, the taller the building, the bigger the building, the more eye-catching the building, the greater the impact the building is going to have. It means that the deeper the foundation needs to be, the deeper the roots need to be in Him. You know, the harsher the climate, the deeper the foundations have to be. You know, buildings that are built, in plate lines, in places where there are earthquakes, or in places where the conditions are going to attack and come against that building, the foundations need to be even stronger than a building built somewhere else. When we think about our lives, when we think about the foundations of our lives and the church and the culture that we live in, which is constantly now pushing harder and harder and harder, the climate, the harshness of the anti-Christian climate, the secular climate that we live in, means that our foundations have to go deeper and deeper down into Christ, rather than thinking we've got to add another foundation in here to increase our stability or to make us more appealing. We've got to go down. We've got to go down deeper and deeper into Him. So we've got to remember who we're building for. We've got to remember what we're building on. And then finally, we've got to remember that what we build matters. Verse 12 to 15. Now, if anyone builds on the foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will become manifest, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. If the work that anyone has built on the foundation survives, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved, but only as through fire. Now, when we read those verses, in some ways they're quite sobering, aren't they? They're quite serious verses. What is it that Paul's saying? He's essentially saying that there's going to be a day of judgment where you stand before God and where you have to give account for the life that you've led, and the works that you've undertaken are going to be tested before God, tested by fire, and if they're proved to be of material that is refined by fire and not destroyed by fire, then they'll come through. They don't get burnt up, and then you will receive some kind of heavenly eternal reward. But if they get burned up, then actually you'll suffer an element of loss, and yet you yourself will be saved. That feels like quite heavy stuff, right? You know, whether you're a Christian or not a Christian here this morning, you think, wow, that's crazy. So what's Paul getting at this morning? It's quite a dramatic picture. What's he saying? I think essentially what Paul is saying is he's warning the Corinthian church, you can't just build anything in your life. You can't just build with anything. You've got to build with the right things, with the things that are going to bring honor and glory to God. What are the right things? Well, he says in verse 12, if anyone builds on the foundation with gold, silver, precious stones. Okay, so we know that those are things that wouldn't be destroyed by fire. You put those things in fire, they don't get destroyed, they come out the other side. And then he says, wood, hay, or straw. Okay, we know that actually those are things that would get burned up. So we go, okay, Paul, I hear what you're saying now. So I've got to build my life with gold and with silver and with precious stones, and not with wood, hay, and straw. I get that, but the problem is you're talking in a metaphor here, so I don't really understand what that actually means. What does it mean that we've got to build with gold, silver, and precious stones? And I think what it means is what he comes back to in verse 16 and verse 17, where he says, do you not know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you? For God's temple is holy, and you are that temple. What Paul is doing here is he's using the language of temple. Gold, silver, and precious stones would have been some of the key components of the Old Testament temple, the temple that Solomon built. This most magnificent, glorious building that looked incredible, made with all of this amazing stuff, and the reason that it had to be made with this stuff and not any old material is, why? Because it housed the presence of God. It was the dwelling place of God. Like if you look through the Old Testament from the building of the tabernacle first, and then to the building of the temple, God was very, very specific in terms of how these things had to be made and what these things had to be made of. It wasn't a case of just find what you can and just kind of knock it together. You know, when you're doing like junk challenges, and it's just like, just go to the scrapyard and just any bits that you can find, and if you can kind of make it look okay, and then my presence will come and dwell in it. It was like, no, you've got to make it with this material and this material, it's got to be this long and this bit here, and you've got to build it to this specification. It was very specific. It was very glorious. And the reason it was is because it needed to be holy. Because the holy presence of God was going to dwell there. And so what Paul is saying, he's saying, don't build with things that are inappropriate for God's presence. God's Spirit dwells in you. Don't build with things in your life, don't build with things in the church that are inappropriate for the presence of God. Because we've got to understand, you know, that the tabernacle and then the temple, as glorious as those things were, they have been replaced. They were always pointing towards something even more glorious that would house the presence of God. What is that thing? It's you and it's me. It's staggering when you think about the glory of the temple. You know, the attention to detail in the temple, the preciousness of the temple. And yet actually now the presence of God dwells. His Spirit dwells in us. We are the temple of God. And so therefore we need to build and adorn our lives with holy things. With things that are the equivalent of the gold, silver, and precious stones. And not just with any old rubbish that we find lying around the place. Things that are appropriate for the dwelling place of God. You know, imagine that you had walked in this morning, and as you walked in, Hugh was standing by the door, and he was saying, "Oh, welcome, that'd be £5, please, for you to come in." And he was just shoving, the money in the back of his pocket. Don't get any ideas, Hugh. And then he kind of came in, and Hugh was like, oh, by the way, we're doing things a little bit differently this morning, so there's some fortune telling going on over there in the corner, so you can go and get your fortune told. There's someone over there with tarot cards. I've set up some little idols at the back that we're going to kind of bow down to at some point during the worship, and our beautiful kind of banners, actually we've replaced those with really inappropriate adult images that we're just going to kind of look at different points, and it's happy hour over at the communion table, so just go on, head over there and, knock yourself out. If you did that, I hope that our response would be, this is so inappropriate. This is so inappropriate for church. And yet, the reality is, often we build things into our lives that are just as inappropriate for the presence of God to dwell in us. And what Paul is saying is, guys, the reality is the church, some of the stuff, crazy stuff I just mentioned, will probably be involved in some of that stuff. Paul's saying this isn't appropriate. You're the temple of God. You're God's dwelling place. Build with things will bring glory and honour to him and won't get burnt up at the end because they are unholy things. Build your life with holy things. Adorn your life with holy things. And I think this is where he comes back to that verse that we began with that we didn't really look at. But verse 1 of chapter 3 where it says, but I, brothers, could not address you as spiritual people, but as people of the flesh. The gold, the silver, the precious stones, these are the things of the Spirit. And the wood and the hay and the straw, these are things of the flesh. And Paul's saying, build the spiritual things. Build the things of the Spirit, not things of the flesh. And what are things of the Spirit? If you tell me briefly, to Galatians chapter 5, verses that I'm sure many of you will be very familiar with. Paul says this from verse 16, but I say walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the desires of the flesh are against the Spirit, and the desires of the Spirit are against the flesh. For these are opposed to each other to keep you from doing the things you want to do. But if you're led by the Spirit, you're not under the law. Now the works of the flesh, the wood, the straw, the hay, they're evident. Sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and things like these. It's not even an exhaustive list. It's like, and things like these. And the reality is, if we're honest with ourselves, we read through that list, we look in our lives, and we think, oh man, there's some stuff here that shouldn't be here. It's like when you go around, when you invite people around your house, but before they come, you kind of do a very superficial clean. Because you're like, there are things that this is mess around the house that you don't want to see. So you're like shoving, it doesn't happen in my house, obviously. I'm just looking at my wife. Our house is always immaculate. But there are, just things that you kind of shove under the bed or put in the wardrobes or just get out of the way because you don't want people to see those things. You don't want people to see the mess. And often the temptation is that we can live our lives like this, where we are superficially clean on the outside, but actually our lives are just full of the mess and the clutter of the world, the things that we don't want anybody else to see. And as long as nobody else sees it, it doesn't really matter. I want to say to you this morning, it does matter because God sees it. And he says, this stuff in your life is not appropriate for my presence to dwell there. It's not appropriate for the temple of the living God. What is appropriate is what we read in Galatians verse 22, that the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. We want to be a people that adorn our lives with the fruit of the Spirit and not with the things of this world, so that our lives are holy and an appropriate dwelling place for God. The whole point of what Paul's saying is this. Remember that what you do in this life matters. It matters. The way that you live your life matters. The way that you live your life doesn't save you. We're going to read many verses that make that point. What Jesus has done on the cross through his death and his resurrection saves you completely. That day when you stand before the judgment seat of Christ, the commendation that you receive for you yourself will be nothing to do with what you've done and everything to do with what Jesus has done. And yet, as we read in those verses, there is still a judgment of the things that we've done. And there is a commendation to come based upon the things that we've done. And Paul says later on in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, that the hidden things will be disclosed. That should be a sobering thing for us when we think about that. But actually the hidden things, the things that we've shoved under the bed, the things that we've stuck in the wardrobe, the things that we didn't want anybody else to see, there will be a day where those things are disclosed. Because what we do in this life matters. Just as Maximus says from Gladiator, what we do in life echoes in eternity. And so we are called, therefore, to take care how we build. We are called to be a holy people. I wonder if we could stand to our feet and just take a moment to respond to God's word. The band can come up. Great. As I was preparing this week's read for God, and lay on my heart two groups of people. The first are those here this morning who you wouldn't call yourself a Christian. Actually, I feel that God's been speaking to you in the worship this morning and through His word. And what I really want to say to you is just to emphasise that last point. I don't want you to hear what I'm not saying this morning. What I'm not saying is that your works are enough for you to make your life right with God. And that if you work hard enough and with the right stuff, that God will accept you. The point is that none of us can do anything to reconcile ourselves to God because of our sin. But Jesus has done everything that needs to be done for us to receive forgiveness and acceptance and new life in Him. And so what I want to say to you this morning, if you're not a Christian, is that at the moment you don't have Christ as the foundation of your life. And there is an invitation for you to make Christ the foundation of your life. There's a house around the corner from us where we live in Whitstable, which was broken and dilapidated and falling down. We used to drive past and thought, that house looks awful. It's such a mess. Nobody can kind of live there. And that's a reflection in some senses of your life before you receive Christ. So there's brokenness, there's dilapidation, and it's not appropriate, not able for God's presence to live in there, and yet He's made you for that very purpose. And just recently, the last month or so, they have knocked down the whole of that house, and they've just over the last few days been building in a new foundation that they're going to build on. And if you're not a Christian here this morning, there's an invitation for you to allow God to come and do that in your life. The Bible says when you give your life to Christ, the old is gone and the new comes. New life in Christ, a new foundation to build upon that can be appropriate for housing the presence of God, the reason that you were made and created. And so if that's you this morning, I really want to encourage you to just respond to that invitation to build that foundation afresh in your life today. And then the second group is for those of you this morning who would call yourselves Christians, and you realise, as I've been speaking, that actually you've subtly laid other foundations other than Jesus in your life. You're subtly putting your confidence or seeking stability in other things other than the foundation of Jesus. Your confidence, even your confidence to enter in before Him. You're subtly thinking, I can do something that makes it right for me to come before God. Actually, it's just saying, no, I want to take those things away and come back deeper into the rootedness of the foundation of Jesus. Or that you realise this morning that actually you adorned your life with things that are inappropriate for God's dwelling place. And if we're honest, probably if we take a look inside, that's every single one of us. Just as there's things in our earthly homes that we think, I really need to tidy that away. It's been sitting there for ages. We just need to get around to tidying it away. And we just let things sometimes sit in our hearts. And that's what happens often. We chase other things. And there's an opportunity this morning just to identify those things, to allow the Holy Spirit to put His finger upon those things and say, Lord, I don't want this wood, this straw, this hay. I don't want to adorn my life with this stuff that's just junk. I don't want to do the fleshly things. I want to lay them aside. They're going to get burnt up anyway, so I want to lay them aside. And I want to start building with holy things. I want to take the holiness of God seriously. I've been called upon my life to be holy as well. So I'm going to sing a song in a moment, but I just want to encourage you, if that's you at all this morning, I just want to encourage you actually just to pop up your hand if any of those things relate to you, just as a sign to God that you want to do business with Him, that you want to take those things seriously. Perhaps we can all close our eyes just so that we're not conscious of what's going on around us. Just take a step of response to God this morning. Jesus, we want to come before you this morning with just humble hearts. Humble and repentant hearts, Lord, for where we have either built our life on things other than you, or adorned our life with things that are not fitting for your dwelling place. And we want to thank you that you are merciful and gracious and committed to our increasing Christ-likeness, that you're committed to presenting your bride as pure and spotless, that you're about a work of beautiful, merciful sanctification in our lives. And so we just offer these things up to you now, Lord. We say we don't want them. We don't want them, Lord. They're worthless. They're like hay and straw and wood. Lord, they're worthless. I thank you, Lord, that you can take them away and help us by your Spirit to walk in your Spirit, to bear the fruit of your Spirit and not of the world. Lord, we lay these things down before you, Jesus. We thank you for your grace and your mercy. And today we make a fresh commitment to building our lives upon you, Jesus, and nothing else. Upon you, Jesus, and nothing else. Let's respond in worship and make this next song our prayer this morning.